Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about Kislev in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires, their strengths and their weaknesses. And honestly, I certainly hope that Kislev does get an update soon enough. Creative Assembly has stated that, but right now Kislev is honestly in something of a trouble zone. But let's talk about it as frankly as we possibly can. Where does Kislev stand? On one hand, they are so powerful from a multiplayer perspective that they're actually banned in a lot of games, from what I have personally heard at the very least. Because, well, By Our Blood as an ability is just ridiculously powerful. It means that your army will not rout easily. Like, the amount of damage to start getting them to rout is fairly significant, and even when they do start routing, they're just going to get this particular ability to become unbreakable. And if we look at things like Kossars, their leadership is pretty good. And this is one of the chief strengths of Kislev, their army. They have really solid infantry with armor Kossars, Tsar Guard, and other units available as well. Like, for instance, Ice Guard may not be the best in melee, but they are fairly decent in ranged from the perspective of supporting an army. They aren't the best damage dealers in range, but you do have plenty of those. With various improvements to gunpowder units, in particular pathfinding, and there's also mods that help with this, but even by default, with various improvements to how units handle friendly fire in terms of shooting. Mind you, it's not less about friendly fire, it's more so about what the game considers to be friendly fire. But with those kind of improvements, things like Streltsy are significantly more useful. Then Kislev also has a good cavalry line, because Griffin Legion has been buffed quite a bit with Glorious Charge. It's ridiculous. This is something the multiplayer community apparently complains a lot about. Now, I'm not someone who focuses on multiplayer at all, but I do watch what they have to say, or I read what they have to say in various discussion boards. So this is one of the things to be said about Kislev. Then, monstrous units. Oh boy. Things like the Incarnate Elemental of Beasts. Really, really good stuff. So on every tier, from the basic Kossars all the way to tier 5, you have a really, really good selection of units. And let's not even ignore the Akshina, which are so bloody broken. Probably one of the best range units, if not the best range unit in the game. There are others that do outrange it, to be sure, and do more damage, but consider that it's a tier 2 unit with Vanguard deployment, Woodsman, and Stock. Yeah, that's pretty ridiculous. I mean, you can talk about Wood Elves having better range units, and they do. But then again, Wood Elves don't have a formidable, heavily armored front line that Kislev does have. Nor do Wood Elves come even close to comparing in terms of cavalry potential, though Stag Knights are fairly strong. But Stag Knights versus Bear Riders, that's not even a discussion. Then we also have to talk about magic. Things like Hag Witches, Ice Witches, all are very, very powerful. Here's the problem, though. One of the significant weaknesses of Kislev is actually regards to those ice switches, because by default, the way the game is designed, you're supposed to spend time over here training Frost Maiden heroes and ice switch lords to get various traits. Well, this is a waste of time, because the traits that they get are randomized. But this is where we get in one of the problems and one of the weaknesses, as I see it. The weakness is that Kislev is incentivized to cheese the hell out of the game. Why start the campaign and train a hero or lord which takes multiple turns when you can just do so in a Realms of Chaos campaign and get a hero that has a trait that you want? Someone like has, 10% cooldown to spells, 30% upkeep for war sleds and control. Those kind of things do matter. That is one of the biggest problems for Kislev, because otherwise you end up with traits on heroes you do have in limited quantities. Keep in mind that, because you only have so many Frost Maidens that you can access, and so many Ice Witch Lords that you can get in a campaign that have very powerful benefits, and yet those benefits are randomized. Now, traits are always randomized, but For other races, traits are nowhere near as powerful, necessarily inherently. There's some really powerful traits that certain lords can get, but nowhere near as like 10% freaking upkeep and recruitment cost combined with 7% missile strength. That's absurd. Or 30 freaking growth. Or 1 hero capacity. This is absurd. And keep in mind that I'm not even touching all the absurdity. Like, for instance, 20% construction cost, which stacks. On one hand, this is a significant strength. On the other hand, it's a significant weakness because it's randomized. And finally, it's a load of bullshit because you can trivialize it through the load save character system. That is a freaking problem. A huge one. The army is there. The power is there. This is one of the reasons I've played Kislev the most out of any race in the game. Because I like human factions. Cafe is boring as dirt. The Empire was really broken before Thrones of Decay. Very different. I don't think I've played much Kislev since Thrones of Decay came out for a reason. So we're left with Kislev. Well, Kislev has a fun and entertaining army. The power there is there. The magic variety is there. Like, you look at Hag Witches over here, you know, which got even their own lore of magic, the lore of hags. You get shadows, you get death, you get beasts. Like, shadows alone would be worth it. But you get 4 schools of magic originally free. So you get a great selection over here of units, heroes, and lord. But you also have to deal with all of the bullshit. There's no reason to recruit a Druzina or a Boyar when you know you have an Ice Witch Lord that gives you those kind of benefits. Like, consider a Druzina, right? Let's consider a Druzina over here. It's a hybrid Lord. He's not the most durable. Ranged heroes kind of suck for a number of reasons. Like, even with all the various improvements to range capability, I find myself that between a range lord and melee lord, I vastly prefer a durable melee lord for a good reason. I want a melee lord that can go in, stuck in there, and have my ranged army, which Kislev does have, to do a lot of the damage. And yes, you do get the reload time reduction for Akshinas over here. That can be extremely useful. I would not necessarily bother with horse archers, but for Akshina, absolutely. Or you get regeneration for Hag Witch heroes, or experience when fighting Force to Cast, or spell resistance, and diplomatic relations for Kislev. But still a really questionable situation, considering compared to what you can get from an Ice Witch Lord. Because, like, looking at these traits, compared to an Ice Witch Lord, yeah, like, Judicator. Like, even a couple of these guys, like, you look at what we can get, Discipline. Now, you can talk about, like, oh, we have the Atamans, they can have some better traits, but it's like, those traits, there's almost no reason to have an Ataman leading an army, because you're risking him, whereas the benefits are from him leading a province. I mean, you can always argue that, well, you can get double benefits and all that. Still, the strength, the military strength is there. Diplomacy-wise, your order, you hate chaos, that's what you're going to focus on. That's kind of the situation. Though, interestingly enough, when you're thinking about Kislev, what is a bit weird is that people like the Greenskins, they do dislike you, but and even Norska dislikes you, but weirdly enough, it's not like a minus 100 aversion. That's actually a significant point, because without minus 100 aversion, which, say, the Empire would have with Greenskins or High Elves or anything like that, you actually end up in a situation where you have a good amount of diplomatic potential with a far wider net of factions than you might necessarily imagine, because minus 40 is something you can manage, and diplomacy is one of the strengths that Kislev does have as a race. And this also translates in the diplomacy that Kislev factions have with one another. See, there is no limitation on Confederation for Kislev factions. So if I were to play my cards correctly over here with the Brotherhood of the Bear over here, I could potentially manage, for instance, a confederation with them very, very quickly here, like next turn potentially. And through that capability of unlimited confederation, I can get, like, I was able to get both Prague and the Druzina Enclave over here in Fort Ostrak, which, by the way, the Druzina Enclave is led by an Ice Witch Lord for whatever weird reason. Still, point is, you do have that diplomatic capability and that unlimited confederation. That's a significant plus. Now, the downside, of course, is that there's only so many Kislev factions, and the big downside is you cheese it. Like, cheesing is something that people are going to view differently. From my point of view, it's the perspective. My issue with it is when cheesing is not just a really good way to play, but the best way to play by far. When playing normally is such a significant nerf. Like, cheesing obviously is always going to get some benefits, but Kislev, because of the issues they do have, the weaknesses they do have, if you're cheesing, you're going to be in a much better spot. And what are those issues that Kislev has? Oh boy. 2 significant problems on the campaign. Actually, 3 of them. But let's start with the most glaring one from my perspective. It's not supporters or devotion, it's the economy. See, the issue with Kislev is that their structures are very costly. Now, this is with a mod that reduces the cost, like a bunch of campaign customization, but by default, Kislev structures are really, really expensive, and the amount of payoff you get, like only 100 income, takes 10 turns to get the money back for the most basic economic benefit, for the most basic economic structure you have. There are various modifiers you can use, but they never end up feeling worth it, especially in terms of structures. Now, you can make it work with the builder benefit for ice switches. Yeah, that's the thing. It's not just strengths and weaknesses, it's the sheer amount of bullshit you have to deal with to make it work. Because most races, the way they work is like, okay, I earn money through income or post-battle, maybe I get some modifiers that benefit me. For Kislev, that's not the case. The money you earn from income is not enough on its own, so you need to use income modifiers, you need to use construction cost modifiers, and you need to use recruitment and upkeep modifiers to get even to the same level as other races. Not only is that a load of cheesy bullshit, is a glaring fucking problem. Because building a massive empire as Kislev feels so underwhelming compared to anyone. It's not like you have an easy road either. You have Frot, you have Azazel, you have Trog, you have freaking Archon. Sure, you have Malachi and Boris Ursus close enough to you if you're playing Katrin or Castalton. But there's also a heap load of enemies to deal with. So Kislev campaigns can be fun from that perspective, but you also realize that dealing with that hasn't rewarded you in any significant way. Say what you will about Nakari, for instance, and Slaanesh. When you're playing a Slaanesh campaign, the payoff is freaking massive, and it feels really satisfying to conquer Ulfan. Unifying Kislev and pushing back the forces of chaos, you're left to territory that's not particularly great, even though that has been improved with the fact that all of Norska is now either frozen or mountainous climate as opposed to chaotic wasteland. And that is a great change. They did it not to benefit Kislev, they did it to benefit Malachi, because dwarves, chaotic realms. Like, yeah, they wanted Malachi to focus on Norska. That's why they did it. And it worked. For Malachi, and Kislev was, Kislev's benefit was a byproduct of it. But it just says a lot that Frunzicate more to help Kislev focus on their campaign centered around being the shield of civilization than Shadows of Change did. It says a lot. Let me put it like that. It's my blunt perspective on that. But while you do have that aspect working out right now, the fact that you don't have an economy and relying on post-battle, you can make it work, but it just doesn't feel great. Then we have these Kislev cities. On one hand, they do offer fairly substantial benefits through these landmarks, which thankfully have had their devotion cost removed, one of the few changes that were beneficial in Shadows of Change. Though they mainly did that to benefit Astankia, they did not do it for Katrin or Sultan. But still, you get these kind of benefits, like being able to get an upkeep for Ice Guard, getting both variants of the Ice Guard at tier 4 as opposed to tier 5. These kind of benefits. Or if we look at Prague, oh my, is Prague something special? You look at Prague, you get a global recruitment duration benefit and capacity over here. A Patriarch building also gives you hero and Lord Recruit rank, or a benefit that reduces attrition and gives you Griffin Legion. Or Ehrengrad, which is freaking extraordinary because it gives you Frost Maiden capacity over here, as well as hero and Lord Recruit rank. Regardless of how you cut it, these cities are substantial from a combat benefit. your recruit rank. But the problem is these cities don't even offer you the substantial economic benefit you want, because unlike regular cities, like a regular provincial capital can go to tier 4 and tier 5, sorry, and can give you tradable resources plus 50%. A Kislev city, which can produce tradable resources, keep in mind, all of them do to some extent or another, like they have marble, they have furs, and they have pottery, clay. They don't have the ability of increasing tradable resources. So their actual economic benefits are not as substantial. Sure, you have a bunch of structures to reduce recruitment costs, construction costs, but a regular random province will be more useful to Kislev from an economic standpoint than the big Kislev cities, which is bizarre to say the least. I feel they should get rid of one of the two growth buildings, maybe merge the two benefits together or force you to choose, whatever. Or just add the tradable resource production faction-wide from these buildings. I don't know, or add an extra income building. That's just my view. Or maybe a choice, trade tariff versus tradable resources, though that's not really much of a choice. Tradable resources is always a smarter decision. But regardless, those are weaknesses because you're investing a lot on a city and cities for various military benefits, which are not the biggest problem you have. Another weakness, by the way, though, and this is purely military, they only have one siege equipment. So sieges, yeah, you have a ranged army, you can make them work. You have magic, but sieges without good siege equipment is not great. There's a reason I play the game without the ability of skipping sieges entirely, thankfully. But it's just not a great dynamic that is on your hands with respect to that. And then the final aspect, the unique mechanic of Kislev, the supporter system. This is flat out a horrible system and one of the biggest weaknesses as well. The benefit here is that, yes, you can invest in Dash, get economic benefits, you can get various army abilities like Dash. If you upgrade it for the research tree, which we'll get to in just a moment, if you upgrade it, you can summon an elemental bear. That is pretty powerful, undeniably so. But the problem is the entire supporter system feels redundant, or you're investing in Ursin, which is just doing it for the sake of supporters. And you're incentivized to abuse diplomacy to max out your supporters. What do I mean, abuse diplomacy? Well, let's just say, the best way of gaining supporters is to occupy settlements. Well, when you occupy a settlement from a faction that you've just traded with, they will not have a garrison. So you end up in a situation where this is the best freaking thing you can do, because it will grant you the most amount of supporters you could possibly get in a campaign. It is fucking crazy. And the fact that you can get a peace agreement instantly with a lot of these factions, because trading, like for instance, let me just give you an idea. Let's go to Osland, right? They like me, all that. Let's say I trade every single thing that I do have, or most of the territory I do have. So Vitevo, Fort Jakova, all that good jazz, right? Not only can I get infinite money for the AI by exploiting this, because, I can go over here, ask for money, and since they don't have anything, I can just ask an amount. But regardless of that particular aspect, you can see that my relations with them are good. So let's declare war on them right here. Take all these settlements back because they don't have a garrison. And then we might just be able to get a peace agreement with these guys. And keep in mind that while I'm playing a modded campaign over here, it's not really affecting diplomacy. This is baseline diplomacy. There's no modifier over here. This is just the fact that they're getting their ass whooped by Festus, or under threat by Festus. This is ridiculous. The strength is there. Few other factions can do it, because no one, you couldn't do this necessarily as Karl Franz. Not in the same way. You can do a variant of this, but keep in mind, Kislev has some pretty substantial benefits with doing this. Like other factions would benefit from money, you benefit from your supporters. Astankia doesn't care about supporters, but her entire system is tedious. You either have a redundant system if you're playing Boar Sources because you're just invoking dash for an economic benefit, which I ask, why wouldn't we just benefit from that economy baseline? But what's worse over here is like the victory conditions. Like your short campaign victory condition requires you to get 600 supporters. That is absurd. You likely will be, if you play normally, you might be able to achieve your long campaign victory condition long before you achieve your short campaign victory condition. And that is freaking ridiculous. That's how Kislev is ridiculous. But strengths, significant army, weaknesses, supporters, devotion, and the economy, economic potential. A significant strength is the confederation capability and diplomatic capability. Weakness, if you will, or bullshit cheese, is how you can abuse that and how you're incentivized heavily to do so in your campaign. In a way, like if I'm playing a dwarf campaign, I don't do stuff like this. If I'm playing an empire campaign, a greenskin campaign, sure, I could do a lot of the things I'm mentioning here. I don't need to do it. I absolutely have no need whatsoever to abuse the game in this way. If you're playing Kislev campaign, it almost feels mandatory to do it, to get the level of power you want in this campaign. And even then, you've still got problems. Christine signing off.